Hi, everyone.
Hello again. We're in the finished mystery, bottom of page 39,
Yes.
and we're dealing with one verse out of these three. So this, going back to the beginning of the letter to Thyatira, to the angel of the church in Thyatira write the words of the Son of God, who has eyes like a flame of fire and whose feet are like burnished bronze. I know your works, your love and faith and service and patient endurance, and that your latter works exceed the first. And here's the new verse. But I have this against you, that you tolerate that woman Jezebel, who calls herself a prophetess, and is teaching and seducing my servants to practice sexual immorality and to eat food sacrificed to idols.
So they totally forget those previous verses, and this is their interpretation. The fourth epoch of the church nominal. So suddenly this faithful church has become a nominal church.
Yeah, the entire church of Thyatira is now called a nominal church, despite the fact that when you apply it in your types and antitypes, in the very next page, you have Elijah in it, and you have Ahab. So both of them are Israelites. The non-Israelite is Jezebel, who you focus on her. But the point that's lost here is that both Ahab and Elijah are part of the people of God.
Yeah.
They're not a nominal church. They are the only church in the world at this time. So right at the beginning, you're in a chaos of types and antitypes, and therefore a chaos of hermeneutics.
So Jezebel ends up being the Roman Catholic Church from the parallels that they give in the book.
Yeah.
All of them are, and then they're not accurate about even the time of the papacy, because they say papacy's persecuting power was exercised through the Roman Empire to which she was joined.
Very questionable assertion, since the Roman Empire effectively was dissolved in the 5th century, just as the Roman Catholic Church is starting to make its rise. So no, you're wrong about your basic assumption. The foundation assumption being that somehow the immorality here that's being talked about has something to do with church and state. We'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
But also tied to this idea that it has to do with the papacy and the Roman Empire is the time aspect. Namely that all of this, in those days when the finished mystery was produced, is tied to the year-day theory. So they've got to make everything fit into the time between around the year 538, when Justinian is emperor, after the fall of the Roman Empire, by the way, as an empire. The nation still exists. Rome obviously is still powerful, but it's no longer a pagan Roman Empire. It's been Christianized, if not not converted to Christianity, but Christianized. So again, another assumption that's false. And then the third assumption, of course, is that the 1260 days of the prophecy and revelation have to do with 1260 years, which therefore expire 1260 years after the reign of Justinian, which is 1798 or 1799.
Yeah, 1799 they say here.
So what's the problem? And then you realize, oh boy, look at this assumption, and just read that bottom paragraph about what happened in 1799.
At the end of the 1260 years, 60 years? Yeah, the 1260 years, the power of the truth and its witnesses was manifested, 1799. And since then, the truth has flowed at the rate of millions of Bibles every year, refreshing the world and bringing forth fruit.
Would they believe that now?
Not back then, they wouldn't think, because they weren't doing the magnitude of work.
They are not doing any of it. They're not around yet. So who is distributing the Bible around the world at the rate of millions from 1799?
Yeah.
And what they said back then was that was done by Christendom's Bible societies.
Yeah.
Now, they've completely abandoned the year-day theory, and with it, they've abandoned the idea that Christendom was fulfilling any of this. Even the types and antitypes here, Elijah is no longer a type of what was going on in the Middle Ages. That is the Waldenses.
They also have a symbolic wilderness, and the 3.5 years, symbolic years. So it's very arbitrary what they decide, and then how they apply it is arbitrary. So here you've got everything applying to the Roman Catholic Church as if there's no other Christians.
And the Waldenses being essentially the Elijah class in the old days.
Yeah.
But now, of course, that's all moved into the new understanding of 1260 literal days from 1914 to 1918.
Yeah.
You are in the wilderness. You are the Elijah class. Part of the Jehovah's Witnesses are also the Elisha class. All of that typology. And that, in turn, has been abandoned 100 years after this.
And then the ones that are outside of the Catholic Church, that they tell you, well, this group they were the real Christians back then. They have to eventually get rid of all the other churches too, because it doesn't fit with we have one true organization, God using
That's right.
and working only through us. So by the time you get to Rutherford, they're already casting stones at everybody else and saying they're not faithful and they're not God's people.
Even though for a while they keep the chronology, namely that the 1260 years and 1290 years and all that stuff, they've kept that as long as they could. Now they've abandoned all of it, of course. Their modern chronology is hanging on just to one of those original dates they had, which is the year 1914. So they take the year-day theory where it's convenient to this day, and they abandon all the rest to make it all about us. So I think the point we have to take away from this, the fundamental point, is that your viewpoint back then was actually superior to what it is now, namely that God was at work all the time, and that the people of God, if you're going to take the papacy as somehow an antitype, the antitype of Jezebel in the Old Testament, then you have to recognize that the people that she was part of, married into, as it were the people of God.
Yeah.
And therefore, in the antitype, the Roman Catholic Church, according to your typology, becomes the people of God.
Yeah.
And they don't want that.
Because even Israel had a division. They had a group, the Northern Kingdom, that were considered apostate, and yet still God was sending people to them, talking with them, working with them, and they are God's people.
Yeah. The Northern Kingdom, and Christianity acknowledges this, that was an apostate kingdom centered in Dan and Bethel.
But God is still working.
But God is still working in it through Elijah, who is one of the same people, and Elisha and all the other prophets are part of this arrangement.
Yeah. Then they make this point about Jezebel. They say to teach and to seduce. That teacheth and seduceth.
Good word.
And they say, my servants to commit fornication, union of church and state, is their application to that.
Well, what can we say to that except that the original theocracy, the only one that ever existed on earth, Israel, was a union of church and state.
That's right. They had a king and the people.
So that's not fornication. It could be fornication when it becomes something that's out of God's plan, but union of church and state was very much the plan in Israel, because they had a federal organization as well as a local organization.
Then the next point they make about eating things sacrificed unto idols, they apply to reverence the creed idols set up by the various ecumenical councils. That's very arbitrary too. So anything written down, any statement of faith or definition becomes an idol?
Yeah.
Do you apply that to the Watchtowerr?
Yeah, so a paragraph this long, 2 paragraphs, that is the Apostles' Creed, is an idol.
Yeah.
But a Live Forever book or a truth book is not an idol.
Yeah. So to me, all your policies, all your statements, which you say have to be believed, even if you're going to change them later, they have to be believed. That's more idolatrous than any statements that are made by the church.
frankly, nowadays, the creeds, although they're repeated in the churches very frequently, you won't get shunned or even asked about whether you adhere personally to those creeds. You repeat them in church, most of us do, but do we ever get grilled as to whether or not we're loyal to them? No, unfortunately, we don't even get asked.
There's an expectation that people have integrity, and that if you're saying this, you're listening to it. But much like Israel could, in the times of the prophets, they could tell you what the law said. That didn't mean they were always obedient to it, but they knew it.
Well, they kept the externals. The rituals went on, even if they added more stuff to it.
And that really is the purpose of the creeds, is to remind you
Of what you're supposed to believe.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's no teeth in the churches today, even in the Catholic Church. There's no teeth to enforce creedal loyalty.
You think it's a plus that you all say the same thing, teach the same thing, talk the same talk, but do you all believe it? How can you even know whether a person believes it?
Yeah.
And even if they do, it's through someone else's dictate. You have to believe this.
Yeah. So it's amazing when you look at this book now after 106 years to think everything they criticize about the Catholic Church in here, they now more than embody themselves, because the Catholic Church has lost a lot of its ability to persecute anybody. And so the Catholic Church, like the Anglican Church, the Lutheran Church, the Methodist Church, they're all going through great changes right now because they have no power over even their own people's minds and hearts.
Yeah.
But you do. You have the power of persecution. Our link is...
It's a video called, well, I don't know exactly what it's called, but it's on Matthew 24:14. Who fulfilled?
It's in the series, Have Jehovah's Witnesses Ever Been God's Organization? What did they say in those days about who was fulfilling Matthew 24:14?
Yeah.
And surprise, surprise, it's not the Watchtowerr Bible and Tract Society.
It's not what you expect. Yeah.
See you next time.